is 7:01 and you are now live.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Good evening, all. Today is February 2nd, Groundhog Day. Did anybody hear the results of the groundhog? What was it, Mark?
He saw his shadow, 6 more weeks.
All right. Winter's not a bad thing. And this is the meeting of the February 2nd meeting of the Common Council of the City of Oneonta is hereby called to order. I will call the roll. Councilmember Murphy.
Here.
Councilmember Davies.
Here.
Councilmember Risberger.
Here.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Here.
Councilmember Carson.
Here.
Councilmember Harrington.
Here.
Councilmember Rafter.
Here.
Councilmember Drenick.
Here.
Thank you. Everybody is here. Okay, small report for me today. Good news, which I'm sure Dr. Jorgensen will expand upon when she gives her report, is that over the last 2 weeks, the positivity rate for COVID in Otsego County has been going down, as it has for our entire region, as it has for all of New York State. So that is very good news. Despite that, there is still considerable concern and anxiety on a couple of fronts. One is the availability of COVID testing here in Otsego County and in the city is close to non-existent, particularly if you're asymptomatic, and that's just not acceptable. What I can tell you is that I have been talking to the state folks about it. I spoke to the state folks about it and Mohawk Valley folks about it this morning. There is some movement to try to increase. You know, we did have Bassett do 4 Saturdays. I think this coming Saturday at 125 Main will be the final one, perhaps. But that's not enough. So there is some movement on the state level to set up a much more comprehensive free rapid testing program here in the city of Oneonta. I can't promise it'll happen, but at least it's being discussed. The other area which is causing a lot of people anxiety is the inability to not only get vaccinated, but to understand how and when and where somebody will become vaccinated. I think people can accept the fact that there's not enough vaccination to go around. It's harder to accept the fact that nobody knows when and how they will get vaccinated. So we need to do better on that in terms of communication. We are having discussions with SUNY and SUNY Oneonta as a possibility, and it's only a possibility. I don't want to get everybody's hopes up of SUNY Oneonta becoming a vaccination site, a state site, but we will see. We're talking about it at least. But here is what the plan is otherwise that everybody should understand. There are three agencies, organizations that are responsible for vaccination here in Otsego County, the County Department of Health. They are restricting their vaccinations, and I think they are restricted to only provide vaccinations to people who are required for their employment. Bassett Healthcare Network is pretty much restricted to only providing vaccinations to healthcare workers. If they have excess vaccinations, they will open it up to the public. The general public, excuse me, which right now consists primarily of those of us over 65, will get vaccinated mostly at our local pharmacies. I am told that there are more than 6, and I have the list, I don't have it with me, of local pharmacies that have been approved by the state to be dispensaries for the vaccine. They don't have the vaccine yet. Once they have the vaccine, they will start to announce that, advertise it, people can make appointments. And that is where most of us will eventually get vaccinated. There is no schedule as to when they will have enough vaccine. but that is where the general public will primarily get vaccinated at our local pharmacies. Along with that, all this is happening at the same time that our college students are returning. And based upon the experience we had with SUNY Oneonta in the fall semester, there's considerable anxiety over that, and I completely understand that. What I can tell you is that the plan that SUNY Oneonta has right now addresses almost all of the concerns that I had and others had with the fall semester plan. It is a solid plan, requires continuous testing of all students, and taking real responsibility for off-campus activities and behaviors, particularly of students who live off campus. That is good news. Of course, the success of it depends upon successful implementation, and successful implementation will only happen if we have good communication, consistent messaging, hand-in-hand enforcement. Those are the things that will make it a success. So far, we're doing very well. Today, Dr. Jorgensen and I attended a meeting with the SUNY Oneonta administration COVID response team, and they've invited us to attend that meeting on a bi-weekly basis, weekly if needed, where we discuss any concerns or positive things that are happening back and forth and how we can partner together. I am very pleased to say that their University Police Department will be doing party patrols on the weekends, assisting Oneonta Police Department. That's very much appreciated. In addition to that, the college has taken full responsibility for off-campus behaviors with very strict enforcement. We have set up direct lines of communication with the council members that have the highest density of students in their wards and the college, and direct lines of communication between OPD and OPT with the college. So communication is good. There's a sense of partnership. We're all speaking the same language. We're all giving the same message, and we're all doing what we can to make this work. Those are all very good signs and very encouraging. With that, unless there's questions, I will move on. Yes, Len.
Gary, you mentioned that our local pharmacies will probably maybe be the forerunner in providing the vaccines. Will that just be primarily the Johnson & Johnson? The other ones, the requirements for storage is so high?
Well, the Moderna does not require deep freeze. The Pfizer requires deep freeze. For that reason, here in Otsego County, we are primarily getting, we're not getting the Pfizer for the most part. It doesn't mean we won't get any Pfizer, but it makes sense that they're shipping the vaccinations that don't require deep freeze to the regions that don't have deep freeze capability. So primarily, we will not be getting the Pfizer here. Some may, but I think we will be seeing mostly those that, right now, the only other one that's approved besides Pfizer is Moderna. That does not require deep freeze. Others should be coming along, and I don't believe the ones that are coming along will require deep freeze either. You want to add something to that, Dr. Jorgensen? You're muted.
Yes, sorry. Just briefly, yes, the pharmacies, and actually I called them all today. Rite Aid on Chestnut Street has actually begun to give some immunizations, and they're using the Moderna. And the other local pharmacy that is expecting a shipment next week is CVS in Cooperstown, also Moderna. The Johnson & Johnson, they say they'll be ready to apply for emergency use authorization within the next week or so, but it's probably going to be a number of weeks before we see that distributed. But most pharmacies have the capacity to use a standard refrigeration that's required for the Moderna vaccine. So I think that's what we'll see used in the pharmacies, at least for a while. If they get the site up at SUNY Oneonta, they have the freezers that could accommodate the Pfizer vaccine. So that's kind of exciting. But does that answer your question, Len?
Thank you, Diane. Okay, if there's no other questions, let's move on. First thing on the agenda are board and commission reports. Airport Commission, Councilmember Carson.
Thank you, Mayor. We met January 20th at 4 p.m. I was happy to say that 4 out of the 5 members of the commission could make it. I don't believe we had met during 2020, so it was good to get everybody together. We also took a moment of remembrance of Paul Robinson, which I thought was extremely important to remember the contributions that Paul added to our commission. I brought the commission up to date on the project for obstruction removal, and we're in the final stages of the security system update. And we're fortunate enough that with the fuel farm going in 2021, some of the requirements for the alarm system dialer will tie into this new fire alarm system that we have, so we can save our costs, save money there. So that was good. And just brought the commission up to date on the land lease, potential for the land lease. And then also brought up that we need to redo our own website design. So one of the committee members is going to take that on. So it was a good meeting overall. I did ask the chairman, Mayor, to turn in his 2020 annual report.
Any questions? Anybody have questions for Len? Okay, thank you. Good report. Planning Commission, Councilmember Risberger.
Yes, thank you. Planning Commission met on January 20th. There were a few items on the agenda. They also now have a new chair. They elected Danny Lappin as the new chair, with Ed Overby continuing on as vice chair. New business. The big news was Corning. Corning was looking for a site plan review to perform various plant upgrades, which include almost a 14,000 square foot manufacturing space. And this space is going on the back side of the building, kind of adjacent to the previous new building that they did a couple years back. So the good thing is that they're building it on an existing slab, so there's not going to be any change in permeability there. So this went through the process relatively clean, and that passed 6-0. The Salvation Army group was looking for a site plan review. They're looking to demolish a structure on the property at 31 River Street. As of right now, they're not building a parking lot. I don't know if that's something that they're going to be looking at down the road. And under old business was a 4 Division Street, the Johnson family. They're looking to construct a 460 square foot structure on an existing foundation to replace a previous structure that stood there, and that passed as well. And that was it.
Questions? Mark, Jack?
Yeah, hey, Dave, can you give me a little bit more information about the 4 Division Street piece?
Oh, without opening it up, I'd have to go back into the my other notes here, which I don't have in front of me.
I'm trying to picture exactly where that is.
Where it is on the property?
I'm trying to picture 4 Division Street. It's the actual location, and specifically what it is that they might be doing.
Well, I apologize, Mark. I don't have that in front of me. I'd have to dig through my online notes.
Or take a ride.
Can I get back to you on that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. Thanks.
Okay, if there are no other questions, zoning board of appeals, I think that's Councilmember Rafter.
Yes, the zoning board and housing board of appeals met last week and only had one thing on the agenda. That was for the windows, replacing the windows with signage and a new sign for the health food store at the corner of Market across from the police station. And that was quickly approved, seen as a desirable thing. And it's part of the grant that we've received for in changing signage, et cetera. And they were awarded a grant, and that's going to move forward. That's all.
Okay, questions? Thank you, John. Commission on Community Relations and Human Rights, Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you, Mayor. We met on, I believe it was Thursday, the 28th at 7 p.m. We discussed our year-end report, which is available or will be made available shortly. We also discussed was how to conduct the Trailblazer Award, which honors a community trail woman in the community that has gone above and beyond. And we're still working on it, but it looks like we might be extending the deadline to March instead of early February this year. Shannon McHugh was voted chair, and Joyce Miller was voted secretary, and we have a new appointee, Deandra Singeti Daniels. And I think those are the major points of the report.
Questions? Thank you, Luke.
Excuse me, Gary.
Oh, wait, yeah, go ahead.
I don't have a question for Luke, but I just wanted to get back to Mark. Mark, this was an old foundation of a previous garage that existed behind the house, and they're rebuilding the garage for a couple cars in the wintertime.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, in fact, I just called it up on Google Maps.
Yeah, I had to dig
know
out
the
my
place
notes
now,
that I keep online.
All right,
So sorry about that.
Katie Lepari-Shu.
Yeah, I have a quick follow-up question for Luke. I was wondering if you could tell us and the community how folks would go about nominating someone for the Trailblazer Award.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe right now they're working on the new form, which is done annually. But if you can do it, I believe through the city's website. If you Google City of Oneonta, and there's a page for the commission there. I'm not 100% sure if it's up yet, because I think Secretary Miller was working on changing the dates around in the application, but it should be up shortly on the commission's webpage, which can be accessed through the city's webpage. Thank you for asking, and sorry I forgot to include that earlier.
There are no other questions. We'll go to Parks and Rec. Councilmember Lepari-Shu.
Okay, so Parks and Rec met yesterday, which means I have a very easy job. All but one commissioner was able to attend. And we did also have a special guest who is the appointee you will see on tonight's agenda, who I hope the council will confirm. We received the Parks report from Parks Director Lou Lansing. The commission voted approving a permit for Central New York Soccer, which may not be their official name, that's what I have in my notes, to approve 2 fields for co-ed adult, meaning 18 and up soccer, to run from June 21st to August 11th from 5:30 to 8 on Monday and Wednesdays. They had applied initially for the Swart Wilcox fields, but based on a couple of factors, Lou recommends potentially Catella Park for them. So all of that is contingent on whether group sports are available at that time based on COVID. So they are tentatively approved for that, which pretty much everybody on the commission expressed excitement about. It's just a nice thing to offer for the community. So that's great. Similarly, there is a bike race that is tentatively approved that would go up near the high school and Wilbur Park. And that's NICA, N-I-C-A. That'll take place in the spring, again, just pending all the safety. And then Lou also shared a compliment for the parks maintenance team. She received verbally from someone who walks her dogs in the park. And she wanted to thank them for doing an exceptional job keeping the area around the large pavilion clear. So that's always nice to hear when someone takes a minute out of their day to appreciate that. We talked for quite a while about the dog park. We had a presentation by Greg where he showed us the park's master plan with the area highlighted where the dog park is meant to go. We talked about preliminary design. He showed us the adjacency to prospective BMX tracks that Councilmember Davies is working toward. Some good news on that is that the dog control officer is going to be joining the dog park group. And I apologize, I didn't get his name. But safety was a huge topic. And so the subgroup, we kind of went over some questions maybe that they will have to answer, kinks that they will have to work out with regard to safety and making sure that once the park is open, that it functions as intended. And then with regard to new business, I had received some correspondence about a splash pad that had been on the park's master plan for some time. And Lou just kind of filled me in that that had been explored, but that it's extremely expensive. And so that's sort of on a wish list for now. We adjourned at 7:53. It was great.
Thank you. Good report. Questions? Okay, thank you all. Okay, next is our committee reports. Planning Committee, Councilmember Risberger.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We met on January 25th, and looking at what we had here, Gary actually attended and went through and gave a rundown of the housing issues that we've had and how we've addressed them over the last 10 years, I would say. I'm not going to go over that. It would take up a significant amount of our time. But Judy Pangman gave her input and told us what's needed. And she said what's happened. Some of the items that came up for discussion were one was tax incentives at the state level that are new. We've addressed these in the past and adopted some of the tax incentives, but we were wondering if there's anything new and that could be adopted. And the talk was that we could talk to Rich Maxwell to know if he knows any tax incentives. That led to Judy also saying that we need to update our fair housing plan and adopt a new one. The last one we have is from the 1980s. And that led to a discussion of, is it time to have, since we've had a housing task force in the past and we've had a giant housing forum with about approximately 80 people attending, do we want to have a permanent housing committee, permanent housing board or commission? So we're looking into this. Mark Davies agreed to write up a definition of what the charge would be for a commissioner board, what their purpose is. I contacted Dave Merzig to see if a charter change needs to be made. I forwarded that information to the committee. It turns out we do not need to make a charter change. And right now we're looking to hopefully have all our ducks in a row and plan and present at the next meeting of the planning committee and then ultimately to the council. Then Mark Davies brought up two issues with having to do with the mountain bikes. And for those that aren't aware, the mountain biking group in Oneonta has grown tremendously over the years. And Sorry about that. Has grown tremendously over the years. And he brought up a BMX pump track. And what this is, Mark would explain this much better than I am, but would it be fair to say it's kind of a training track, Mark, for those that are mountain biking and teaching them how to maneuver with their bike a lot better?
Right. Work on handling skills, learn how to be able to maneuver the bike, absolutely.
And Mark can provide a great video of a BMX pump track that's really great to watch. And I've done one of these. We have one right now in the New Island Trail, and it's a lot of fun. So right now we're looking at potentially building one in the Niwa Park. So Mark is looking at doing a cost analysis and figuring out what size would be needed to build this. We'd probably have to look at fitting it in with a Parks Master Plan and present to the Parks and Rec Committee. So Mark Davies has agreed to look into that with Greg Mattice, and then Katie would be able to get that on the pump track, get the pump track on the Parks and Rec agenda when it's ready to go. Now, the other item that came up for discussion was the Upper East Street trails. I was not aware of this, that the city owns property north and south of Hoffman Road, and it's a significant amount of property. It's over 100 acres south of Hoffman Road. And Mark, did we ever say how many acres are north of Hoffman Road?
Approximately, but it's tied into a lot of other land there. It's hard to pull it apart to see what that exact number is.
Okay. But we could potentially tie the two together, but the tie-in would be by going back out onto East Street. Some of the needs that we would need up there would be a small parking lot and a trailhead, but there's potential to tie into the College Camp bike trails. So what we're looking to do is Greg's going to talk with Dave Merzig to see what's needed to establish a new trail system up there that's city owned. And Greg is also going to discuss with SUNY whether it's even feasible to tie this new trail system into the existing trail system on the college property. So as of right now, that's where we are with these, and it's a lot of exciting stuff, and hopefully we'll have some kind of an answer of which way we want to go for the next meeting. So I'm sure some of the things I think we'll be able to make some progress on. Others are going to probably take a little bit longer, but it would be great if we could have some of this ready to go by the spring sometime.
Questions? Okay, thank you, Dave.
And I apologize for what was going on here. I had my screen reading here, so I couldn't see any of you guys. And then my daughter came up with something for me and was standing holding it out, holding it out for me. So I was trying to do two things at once here. So.
Welcome to Zoom.
Yeah.
Finance, Human Resources Committee, Councilmember Carson.
Thank you, Mayor. We met 6 p.m. on the 25th of January. I believe we had 10 items on our agenda. Started out with 9. I believe Ginny added one more to our list. She likes doing that. We vetted, I believe, all 10 of those. On our agenda tonight, motions 3 through 10, your consideration, and then we'll be discussing 12 and 13. If there's any questions?
All right. That was an efficient report. No questions? Let's go to Dr. Jorgensen for the City Health Officer report.
Okay. I would like to expand on what the mayor said in terms of the regional and state numbers coming down, because worldwide the numbers, as you can see from the top graph, are also somewhat declining. A total of 102 million.
We don't see your screen, Diane.
Oh, you don't? All right. Sorry about that. All right, wait a sec. Somehow I have to do this to get back. All right, well, sorry about that. All right, now, can you still hear me? Okay. Now can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, in the world, numbers are, you can see, are beginning to decline, but still over 102 million confirmed cases worldwide and 2.2 million deaths. In the United States, you can also see the numbers coming down, although these numbers represent 2 million more than when I reported to you 2 weeks ago. You can see that both deaths and hospitalizations are somewhat lagging indicators. Here you see the number of deaths have sort of leveled off, but have not really begun to decline significantly. There were over 90,000 deaths in the United States in the month of January, which is the highest monthly total to date. Here in New York State, numbers are also declining. That's the good news. And you see, again, the hospitalizations and deaths are somewhat lagging, but we anticipate those will continue to decline as the cases decline. This is Mohawk Valley dashboard. And what we're looking at here are the new cases per 100,000. You can see those are also going down, as also our positivity rate of 4.4 is substantially less than it was 2 weeks ago when it was around 7%. In Otsego County, similarly, new cases reported today were 8. That's much less than we had been seeing earlier, or actually last month. There are still 14 patients hospitalized and 1 new death reported. Here's their dashboard. You know, again, about 2 weeks ago is when we had the highest number of active cases, over 250, and now those numbers are coming down. Here's the graph of number of cases per day. Again, you see the downward trend, all of which is quite encouraging. Heidi from the health department told me today that she's not aware of any specific clusters here in Oneonta. As I reported 2 weeks ago, there was an outbreak in the Fox nursing home. 2 weeks ago, there were 27 positives. That peaked at 66 residents, not including the staff, of which there were 30 some positives. But I heard today that the numbers are coming down now. They have had a total of 9 deaths, but again, feel that the outbreak is resolving, and staffing, which was quite critical for a while, is now improving. I was likewise very worried about the Red Jug. Mark noted 2 weeks ago that they were advertising an event, and there was that weekend a bartender who tested positive, so alerts went out. Heidi today assured me that there does not seem to be other cases associated with that positivity. Let's see. Okay, wastewater. This graph, though, said it was updated today. The last data it has is from the 19th. We have received reports since then. Our most recent report from the 29th showed the level of wastewater COVID RNA below the detectable limit. So that's somewhat reassuring. And here you can see Otsego County in the pale blue, which represents a positive or not concerning alert level. This is a little complicated, but I wanted to show you. This is from the SUNY COVID tracker website. And this tells you that this week there were 19 students who tested positive. And in the last 2 weeks, there have been 21 students who tested positive. And if you go down to the bottom, you can see that of the 25 total students currently in isolation for COVID-19 positivity, 21 of those are residing off campus. So that's, for me, a little bit of a worry in terms of our community. At our meeting today, the college did assure us that they are providing support for these students. And I'm confident the communication will continue in a positive way. According to the Hartwick website, there are no active cases on the Hartwick campus at present. So on to testing. Gary's absolutely right. We are so undersourced in terms of testing capacity. It's very discouraging. There are 2 upcoming clinics at 125 Main Street, the 6th and the 20th. Those are morning only clinics. I'm not sure if they're full yet, but just to know those are still available, and there may be more community clinics in Cooperstown. The Biden administration did announce last night they have invested over $230 million to boost availability of the Illume at-home rapid test. They're planning to have a U.S. facility begin producing these tests. Those are the tests that are a little card, like a pregnancy test, that one can do on their own, and then the result goes to their smartphone and then automatically uploads to the health department. So it requires a fair amount of sophistication, I think, to use it, and also at present costs $30. So I'm not sure how available it will be for the general public, but the government seems to be thinking this is at least one option to get behind, and perhaps it will help fill the gap a little bit here in our community. Speaking of health department, I did want to clarify that the SUNY, when I talked to Heidi today, she did confirm that the SUNY people are giving them daily reports of their positive cases. So that is being accounted for in the data you see from the county. There is sometimes a little mismatch because some of the students' home addresses are not in Otsego County, but I think they are doing their very best to make sure that the numbers that you see on the college dashboard, SUNY tracker site, as well as on the county, adequately reflect what's happening in the community. Vaccines, moving ahead. This is from the Department of Health New York State vaccine dashboard, where you can see 1.5 million first doses have been received. I just saw a notice from the governor that actually in the state over 2 million first doses have been distributed, and that's because this doesn't include the vaccines that went directly from the federal government to the pharmacies, then to the nursing homes for distribution. The good news is that the governor also announced that the federal government will be increasing their supply to the state in the next 3 weeks. Not hugely, but I think he said 20%. So we may see more availability here. As we all know, getting appointments and local availability has been a huge issue. Gary was exactly right, in describing sort of where the vaccines are going now. Fox did get some vaccines this week, but they have been charged with prioritizing 1As, so they're going out to some congregate facilities, as well as continuing to immunize frontline healthcare workers. The 1Bs are being primarily done through the county, so there will be a county clinic tomorrow where some of our essential workers will finally get a chance to be vaccinated. And again, in terms of our elderly population, that's mostly left to the pharmacies, and hopefully we'll see that happening. I was surprised to hear that Rite Aid here in Oneonta had actually been providing some vaccines. Apparently, to get to them, one needs to go to the New York State site that then directs you to Rite Aid. But again, that's very hard to get. The CVS, on the other hand, in Cooperstown told me that in order to get an appointment there, one goes to the actual CVS website. I think that's as clear as I could get it. So at least one more resource for vaccines in the area. In terms of, I mentioned the Johnson & Johnson vaccine may be available next month. That would be exciting because it is a single dose and it has easier distribution requirements in terms of not needing to be refrigerated. Variants, I know that question came up last time. As you know, there are these new variants. The one that's most prevalent here in the United States is the UK variant, which is felt to be, well, is known to be more transmissible. Not sure if it's more lethal. In general, the vaccines that are currently in use, the Moderna and Pfizer, they are being tested, and they should work reasonably well for the new variants. Although some work, especially with Johnson & Johnson done in South Africa, indicates that the South African variant may be more likely to be resistant, or the vaccine may not likely cover that variant as well. So the message that, that we keep hearing from the experts is that it's kind of a race between really pushing the vaccines out and what we know will be the development of variants going forward. Vaccines still remain our best tool to help ultimately get back to normal. So now I will take any questions.
Luke?
Thank you, Dr. Jorgensen. I was wondering, especially because I've heard a little bit of confusion about where people fall in their vaccination groups. Is there a particular app or website that you use to kind of find out who's available for the vaccine and who's not?
Well, the state website does to some degree clarify what 1A, 1B means, but then a subset of that, if you go to the county, and actually I think Carrie may have put it on the city site, but if you go to the county website, there's a pretty good explanation how they are only charged with immunizing a subset of 1B, which includes most front-facing essential workers, but not those over 65. And I think if you really dive into the "Am I eligible?", it will, on the New York State Department of Health site, it will help sort that out a little bit. But I agree, it's a little bit confusing.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, New York, NY, am I eligible? Will give you all of the exact guidance as to who is currently eligible. It won't tell you where to get it, but it'll tell you who's eligible.
Mark?
Janik?
Yeah, and I think all of that is pretty clearly on the front page of the Support Oneonta site.
Thank you, Mark, for doing that.
Anything you ever need to know is on Support Oneonta, something I always forget to say. Any other questions? Okay, thank you,
Oh,
Dr. Jorgensen. Go ahead.
Wait, one more thing. I forgot. In terms of testing, hopefully next week we will finally begin doing our surveillance pool testing through upstate for our police and fire departments. So that's a good thing about testing. That's finally going to be up and running.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Jorgensen. Let's go to the city COVID-19 task force update. Who wants to give that update?
I'll take that, Gary. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Greg.
Just, obviously we have Diane at our meetings, and a lot of what she shared, I'm not going to repeat, of course. But we did meet last Friday. Obviously, as Diane mentioned, we're working closely with her. She's working to make us aware of what sort of vaccination clinics are available to our essential workers and those who are eligible. So we'll keep on top of that. PPE is in good supply in the city as it has been. We have no concerns there. The city has drafted, much to the credit goes to Katie for drafting the Public Health Emergency Continuity of Operations Plan, which the state has required all municipalities to craft. It's not specific to COVID, it's generic, and then it can be applied to any pandemic or health emergency. That's something that we need to have our bargaining units review, and they've been sent that for review and will be submitted to the state shortly thereafter, within a month or so. And as Diane mentioned, the recent wastewater results are trending downward, the most recent being less than limited quantification, which just builds our confidence in the local trend that's shown in the case numbers as well. And those are the highlights. And our next meeting, we're meeting bi-weekly now, unless reason to meet more frequently. So our next meeting, as it stands, will be February 12th.
Okay, questions, anybody? Thank you, Greg. Oh, Dr. Jorgensen?
Sorry, one more thing. David brought to my attention this week the fact that the new federal mandate for wearing masks on all public transportation kind of exceeds the state guidance in that it specifies that certain face coverings, which include bandanas and scarves and even any mask with an exhalation valve, are not really acceptable on public transportation. So we talked about that, and hopefully that communication, Carrie put that communication on the city site so people begin to understand that. We sent that message up to the college. And David, I think we'll have your drivers have, a supply of the disposable masks to give folks who don't have acceptable face coverings. Do you know, has that been an issue so far?
No, has not.
Okay.
Also, speaking of transit, I don't know if everybody's aware, but I want to thank David he did an excellent job of working with the SUNY Student Association in negotiating a contract that works for everybody in the spring semester. We are not doing bus service after 9 p.m. approximately from the campus to downtown. David reports that this weekend was no problems whatsoever. Correct, David?
Yep. Everything was smooth sailing. Perfect weekend. No problems.
Thank you for all you're doing, David. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
We know that you don't not have an easy job right now.
None of us do.
Okay, if there's no other questions, then we'll go to the consent agenda. I believe there's 11 items on the consent agenda, which I will read through. I'll find the correct mouse here. Motion 1, that the council approves the minutes of the regular meeting, which was held on January 19th, 2021. 2, motion that the council approves the warrants totaling $349,314.60, and that the same be placed on the Director of Finance's desk as presented. Number 3, motion that the council awards an annual stipend in the amount of $3,000 to water treatment plant laboratory technician Scott Kellogg for the performance of quality assurance activities pursuant to the Environmental Laboratory Approval Program requirements. This would become effective February 3, 2021. 4, motion that the council temporarily appoints Peter Barbario to the position of fire captain. This would become effective February 3, 2021. The base salary would be $62,961. The council authorizes this interim appointment pending the completion of the competitive civil service exam process to fill the position on a permanent basis. 5, motion that the council appoints Lieutenant Christopher Witzenberg to the position of acting police chief. This would be effective February 3rd, 2021. The council further authorizes an annual stipend in the amount of $15,000. This would be for the additional police chief duties to be performed. Len, you notice I have my airport mug? Six, motion that the council authorizes the mayor to sign a 2-year lease extension with LFT Amsterdam of Levities Management LLC, care of Levities Management LLC, for the OPT Transit Hub at 104 Main Street for January 2021 through December 31, 2022. This would be a cost of $19,640 for 2021, $20,033.28 for 2022, subject to review by the city attorney. 7, motion that the council authorizes the mayor to enter into a lease agreement as presented with Adirondack Transit Lines Incorporated of 499 Hurley Avenue, Hurley, New York, for lease of the bus terminal space located in the parking garage. Said lease shall be subject to a review by the city attorney and be for the period July 10, 2019 through December 3rd, 2022. 8, motion that the council approves the 2020 budget transfers and amendments totaling $95,540 as presented in the attached reports. 9, motion that the council approves the 2021 budget amendments totaling $23,000 as presented in the attached reports. 10, motion that the council declares the items per the attached list as surplus and authorizes the purchasing agent to dispose of same. Items determined to have value will be listed for sale on the auction website, publicsurplus.com. And 11 is a motion that the council concurs with the mayor's recommendations and approves the following appointments to our city boards and commissions. The Board of Assessment Review, this is a reappointment of Lori Neander for a term which would expire September 30th, 2025. Environmental Board, this is a new appointment for Catherine Pollock for a term expiring January 14th, 2024. And Parks and Recreation, a new appointment of Trevor Huntsman for a term expiring January 14th, 2024. That concludes the consent agenda. I'll entertain any requests to remove any of those 11 items. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Councilmember Lepari-Shu, second by Councilmember Carson, and I will call the vote. Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davies?
Aye.
Councilmember Risberger?
Aye.
Councilmember Lepari-Shu?
Aye.
Councilmember Carson?
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter?
Aye.
Councilmember Drenick?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. The consent agenda passes unanimously. We now have some additional motions. The first is motion 12, which is a motion to authorize the mayor to submit a grant application to the New York State Department of Transportation and the Federal Aviation Administration for an airport improvement project for the partial parallel taxiway RW24 design. This is for design only, not construction, with an estimated cost of $344,072, with the federal share being $309,664. The state share would be $17,204, leaving a city share of $17,204, which would be funded via the general fund balance. I'm going to, before I ask Councilmember Carson to provide any additional explanation on that or answer any questions, I just wanted to also inform you that, as you probably know, Carrie Harrington was serving as the airport manager when she was the deputy clerk. In her new role as the city clerk, this was just one extra responsibility that she didn't need with all of her new responsibilities. So I asked Councilmember Carson if he would serve as the, we're not using the title airport manager, but he would be the liaison between the airport commission and the council and the city staff. And he is listed as a contact person with the New York State Department of Transportation and the FAA. And I appreciate him stepping up and doing this for us. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Len, to provide any additional information regarding this grant application. And I apologize it's coming to you last minute, but that's when I received it.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. And with the new added duty came just for this motion was a 414-page document that I had to read. And then the field farm is a 92-page read. So as the mayor said, that our share is $17,204. This is for the engineering of a taxiway, a parallel taxiway, to get down to the end of 24. Since 1965, when the airport was opened, never been a parallel taxiway. It's always been a little precarious. The aircraft actually leave the main terminal area, and then they have to make sure both ends are clear, and then go on down to the very end of 24, get off, turn around, come back. So this is a great thing moving forward. That amount, I just want our fellow council members to know that that $17,204 is not paid out today. That'll be paid out. This is an 18 to 20 month process of engineering. So it'll be in slow increments of when we actually have to make those payments.
If there are any questions, Dave Risberger.
When's the deadline for submitting the grant application?
Soon, very soon. The FAA is reviewing the application as we speak. And once they're complete, I guess then we will submit the application for review.
Any other questions? Okay, do I have a motion to approve? Councilmember Risberger, do I have a second? Councilmember Davies? Any additional discussion? I'll call the vote. Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davies?
Aye.
Councilmember Risberger?
Yes.
Councilmember Lepari Shu?
Aye.
Councilmember Carson? Councilmember Harrington?
Aye.
Councilmember Rafter?
Aye.
Councilmember Drenick?
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, motion 13. Motion that the council authorizes the mayor to enter into an agreement for payment in lieu of taxes by and among the city of Oneonta and the Deet Street Lofts Housing Development Fund Company as presented in the attached resolution. Let me give a little explanation of this. For those that may not be familiar with it, affordable housing is taxed differently, allowed to be taxed differently per New York State property tax law 581A. It can be taxed based upon an assessment based upon the property's income that it derives, as opposed to the value of the structure on the property. The reason for that is nobody gets rich on affordable housing. The rents are held to a very low level, reducing the amount of revenue and amount of profit. And for that reason, it's taxed on a income or profit basis. This probably goes back now to 2019. We had asked George Courtower to work with our assessor, Rich Maxwell, to provide, in his estimation, what the tax revenue would be for the property that was being developed there, based upon the 581A calculation, which Maxwell came up with an approximation of $70,000 per year. In the meantime, Ken Carney, the developer, hired his own assessor to do an approximation, who came up with approximately $61,000 per year. So Ken has agreed to pay the $71,000 a year instead of going through the assessment, which is approximated at $61,000 a year, with a 2% increase every year. This would be for the duration of the period that the state requires this to remain as affordable housing, which is 40 years, at which time the pilot and exemption expire, and the property would be taxed if it no longer remains as affordable housing based upon the value of the structure. Questions? Well, why don't I entertain a motion to approve, and then we'll do discussion. Probably best. Do I have a motion to approve? Councilmember Carson, do I have a second? Councilmember Rafter. Now discussion. Councilmember Risberger.
Yeah, you said it was 71,000. Did you mean 70,000, Gary?
I thought I said 70. If I said 71, I misspoke.
Okay.
61 was what the appraiser estimated it would be.
And that's with an
70
increase.
is
That's with an increase of 2% every year.
2% a year, correct. Any further discussion?
I just think it's important, Gary, to note that right now we receive no tax revenue on that property. So this will be going from 0 to 70. I think that's a good thing.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I will call the vote. Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Davies.
Aye.
Councilmember Risberger.
Yes.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Aye.
Councilmember Rafter. I'm
Aye.
sorry, Councilmember Harrington.
Aye.
Councilmember Rafter.
Aye.
Councilmember Drenick.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. That passes unanimously. I'm going to jump the order here because 14 is a discussion without an actual motion. Let's do all of the motions first. Go to 15. Motion that the council authorizes the mayor to submit a grant application to the New York State Environmental Facilities Corporation Green Innovation Grant Program for the purchase and installation of equipment to identify stormwater inflow and infiltration into the city's sanitary sewer collection system, with an estimated cost not to exceed $175,000, with the city's share being 25% of the total project cost, to be funded by the city's general fund and sewer fund. Greg, do you want to give any further explanation of why this is needed?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. So the equipment that we would hope to buy with this would include one or more of the following, which we're working to, determine exactly what is eligible in the scope. I guess to jump back, we only became aware of this grant opportunity in mid-January, so it's been a quick turnaround, and the deadline for application is February 12th, which is why, having failed to get this on the Monday Finance Committee agenda, which was my oversight, we asked to have it brought directly to the council tonight. So apologies for the quick review time, short review time. So we would hope to get some portable flow monitoring equipment. This can be installed in multiple manholes throughout the city's sewer collection system. And what that does is monitors the flow through those manholes over time. So you leave them in place for several weeks at a time. You monitor the normal flow. When you see a rainfall event and that flow goes up, typically, while stormwater is not intended to be in the sewer collection system and shouldn't be going to the wastewater treatment plant in any system, there is infiltration and inflow, which comes either from roof leaders that are tied in, because that used to be allowed and no longer is, and things haven't been updated, or just through infiltration from groundwater coming in through leaking joints in the pipe and the manholes. So by strategically placing these flow meters, you're able to identify where that flow increases and quantify that. And then that kind of narrows down your search. So once you see, a big inflow or infiltration in a certain area, you can kind of move those flow meters around and try to narrow down where that problem is and try to eliminate it, which obviously saves money for the city, treatment costs at the wastewater plant, and also helps reduce our probability of having a bypass event in the wastewater plant, which can happen in a very high rainfall event. So that's the general purpose of those. And then to further, inspect the pipes, once you get them narrowed down enough, you need to get in there with a robotic camera, which we have now, but it's aging. We've identified that for being in need of replacement. It's actually, we requested it in the 2021 budget is one of the items that the council opted to reevaluate in July, along with the van it's currently a 1976 van that's barely running, that pulls that equipment around. We'd like to replace that as well. And that's included in a $125,000 estimate that we had for the 2021 budget, again, to be reconsidered by the council in July. So when this grant opportunity came up, I thought it was a good fit. It's something that we already identified as a need, and possibly if we get it, it could reduce our costs and also gain us this other equipment, the flow monitoring devices that would further aid in our efforts to improve the system. So that's the rundown. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
And I look forward, Greg, to that 1976 van going on publicsurplus.com. Somebody can get a good camper out of that.
Yeah, those are coming back in style. It's already refitted.
Mark Davies?
Greg, thanks. So if I heard this correctly and to recap this, so we would be investing $43,750 towards the grant, but what we'd be getting back would basically equal the $125,000 that we had budgeted, and we're going to push it off till July if we were to get that. Is that correct? Plus, obviously, some additional things as well.
Right. So if we ended up applying for 175, and it might be a number less than that, so if we, in our discussions with the EFC, if they tell us that the van just isn't eligible, then we couldn't apply for that. So, but whatever the amount of the grant is, we would contribute a 25% match. So ideally, if we got the whole thing, then we would end up paying somewhere around $43,750, and instead of paying 125, and we would get more than just the van and the sewer camera, we'd get the flow meters as well.
Thanks,
Greg. Would there be savings in terms of the amount of chemicals we use, wear and tear on machinery, because we would be processing significantly less water? We won't have to process clean rainwater.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yep.
As well as, is there an environmental impact to efficiency of the wastewater treatment plant if we don't have to process all of that clean water?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly in the highest flow events, we do still occasionally have some bypass events. Our wastewater staff does a great job to minimize those, but at some point the plant can only handle so much. So if you can eliminate or remove the stormwater that shouldn't be going there, then you can avoid that problem. The city's not under a consent order of any sort from the DEC, the regulatory agency, to do this or to reduce I&I, but in communities where they've had significant issues with I&I and resulting in a lot of bypass events at the plant, they sometimes get put under a consent order. So it's certainly something we want to avoid happening.
What does I&I stand for?
Sorry, that's inflow and infiltration. So inflow or infiltration of stormwater or groundwater into the sewer collection system, where you don't want it.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay, do I have a motion to approve? Councilmember Harrington, second by Councilmember Murphy. Any further discussion? I'll call the vote. Councilmember Murphy,
Aye.
Councilmember Davies,
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger,
Yes.
Councilmember Lepari,
Aye.
Councilmember Carson,
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington,
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter,
yes,
Councilmember Drennick.
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, next item doesn't require any formal action, but it's continuing discussion regarding issuing an RFP for the transit hub final design. I will just give a quick background to make sure we're all in the same place as where we are right now. Unfortunately, this project started, I don't know, at least 2 years ago. It might have been 3. Greg, do you remember? It's at least 2 years ago.
At least 2, yeah.
The under a previous council, for the most part. This project really restarted back in 2017 as part of the Downtown Revitalization Initiative project. It was identified that the city has one of probably the largest transportation bus system for a city our size in the state. But yet we don't have a suitable facility to serve either our drivers, staff, or passengers, as well as the location of the buses on Main Street is not best and even not safest. The thought was that City of Oneonta should have what is called a multimodal transit hub. And actually that's something we've emphasized is the multimodal aspect. Now, I know that we don't have a lot of modals here of transportation, but the thought is that we could bring together all of our different forms of transportation in one location, in addition to the buses and the out-of-town coaches. There's the possibility for something like a zip car terminal for people who don't have a car, but when they want to leave the city, could access one. For charging stations, for electric vehicles, for bike share programs, for taxi stands, all could be centrally located in this, what they call a multimodal transit hub. So the previous council had authorized the issuing a contract to a company called Wendell. I believe they're out of the Buffalo area, Western New York. Is that correct, Greg? And they have a lot of expertise and experience in designing transit hubs of all sizes for big cities and small. They came here and they spent a week here doing what they call, I forget what they call it. It's a deep dive intensive look.
Immersion.
Immersion. They spent an entire week here looking at all of the locations where they could possibly put this transit hub, trying to fully understand the city. They worked with David Hoteling closely, understanding the schedule of the buses, the routes of the buses, the number of passengers, and came up with several different options to explore, including 3 different options, I believe, on Market Street. Over the next year, each of those options were explored. They all fell apart primarily because we could not acquire the property that was needed for each of those. Finally, went back to the original concept in the DRI, which was to make it part of the parking garage, which was rejected originally because it was felt that the parking garage was not big enough to do it properly. But not being able to find another location, we went back to the parking garage. They created a design with a transit hub, which was on the smaller side than was anticipated. But the problem with it after it was designed was we found that they were planning on eliminating 100 parking spaces. We objected to that. They changed the design to bring down the number of parking spaces to be eliminated to possibly 70, but that still was pretty much a deal breaker. So we said how to come up with another plan. It was just about that time that we became aware that we were able to acquire the property 27 Market Street, which is the building owned by the 12 tribes. So we said, let's give that a try. So they came up with a plan to have the transit hub co-locate at the renovated parking garage, as well as have the structure part of it be at 27 Market Street, with some of the out-of-town buses, I believe, being at 27 Market Street. Now, that is a plan that has been embraced by the people who have spent the last few years working on it, by the people who will use it. David O'Tailing thinks highly of the plan from an operations standpoint. Greg Mattice, thinks highly of the plan, both from a city aspect and a engineering aspect and the land use aspect. Stephen Yearley has weighed in on the land use aspect. And of course, Ginny has weighed in on the financial aspect and supports it. So based upon that, the next step, and certainly, if our experts who worked on support it, I support it. But based upon that, the next step would be to create more detailed final design and structural documents, architectural, engineering, construction documents. And we would issue an RFP to choose a company to do that for us. That is not something that typically requires council approval. What's required is the final award of the contract. But some of the council members had additional questions when this came up last week. So Greg offered to accept all questions and provide answers, which I believe he had a number of questions and provided answers. So I guess the first step is, does anybody have additional questions, or were your answers not adequately answered by Greg? Okay. So I'm sorry, Mark Davies.
Yeah, I'll ask a few questions if you don't
Sure.
mind.
No, please.
Just trying to clarify some of the material that was sent to us, and I certainly appreciate the time that Greg and Jenny put into it. There was a lot of information to digest, and it was quite comprehensive, but I did have some questions about it. So this question is more for Jenny. Well, I have a couple, if you don't mind, I'll just go through them. So with the second project, we're talking about a $3.5 million difference that we would then bond out, and that debt would be $235,000 a year. Is that correct?
That is correct. If we're not able to have any more grant awards towards the OPT project side, yes, it would be a $3.5 million bond issue with an annual payment of approximately $235,000.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. And then on the same line, I don't know what page it was. It actually wasn't marked. In the expenditures page, kind of near the end of the report that you put together, it said option 1, which was the parking garage build out. It said lease $19,645. Option 2, lease $0. What's the difference? What are we leasing at the parking garage that we wouldn't be leasing in the other site?
I'm going to let Greg answer that more precisely, but what it is it's the different layout between option 1 and option 2 as far as the parking spaces that are available. Greg, on your parking study?
Yeah, can we jump in, Jeannie? I think I'm just pulling this up. This was on the last page or second?
Yeah, let me find it as well.
The third to last, seventh page. It would be under OPT bus store and Trailways bus terminal that we were looking. So I think so. Currently, we have an expense? Is that expenditure you're looking at, not an income, right?
Yeah, it was an expenditure.
Okay, so that's what we pay the Levitas company, the Clinton Plaza, for the space where OPT is now, which is like the lease that you approved to renew tonight. So we
Right.
pay now, we wouldn't pay that in the future.
So in fact, that expenditure should be zero on that particular site because that expenditure would not extend to the parking garage site. Is that correct? Because it's listed as an expenditure at the parking garage site.
Okay, I might be looking at a different page where I'm looking at, I don't see that.
So at the bottom, so it says OPT bus store and Trailways bus terminal, 2,100 square feet. Is that saying, is that the current one?
That is the current one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry to interject. Would it be helpful if someone could share their screen so that we are literally on the same page?
That would make a lot of sense, Katie. I could do that.
Thank you.
Yes, Mark, I think what you're looking at the OPT bus store and Trailways terminal, that is for the current annual expenditures. And the lease agreement there is for the current OPT store on Main Street. If indeed we build the transit hub, we will no longer have that lease agreement because we will no longer be renting the Clinton Plaza area.
Okay.
Is this the page you're referring
Yep,
to?
that's it. So I was thrown off thinking that was the site one. So that's, now I understand what we're looking at.
Okay.
Yeah, these last 3 pages were intended to be a comparison of basically the operation and maintenance costs. So this is current. And then the next page was the transit hub option 1, which was 2-10. That's the parking garage.
All right, there we go.
Is 27 mark.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And so the difference in revenue, though, between the two sites, and I'm sorry, this is my last question here, in cost between the two sites is $7,000. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and that's based
Approximately.
part on our ability to collect revenue. In option 1, we really just have the Trailways space, the inner city bus revenue that we get now. We would continue to get that, although it would be applied to the transit fund instead of the general fund. In option 2, with the ability based on the dimensions of the building and the space available, there's just more space there to take advantage of some additional commercial leases. Obviously not identified at this point. It's theoretical, but it would be something that we could take advantage of.
Good. Thanks, Greg, for explaining that. Thank you, Jenny.
Anybody else have questions that weren't answered or new questions? I can't see everybody, but I assume nobody is.
Mayor.
Yep.
Councilmember Lepage.
I'm sorry, I can't see her.
That's okay. Thank you. Let me just unmute myself. I got all wonky when Greg started screen sharing. Thanks for doing that, though, Greg.
Katie, you're now muted. There you go.
Okay, got it. Yes, so the loudest argument that I've been hearing over the last few weeks for option 2 over option 1, and the mayor just reiterated it in his summary, is the loss of parking spaces. And so I guess I was just hoping that someone could, this might be Greg, clarify how they got to the number of parking spaces lost. Because obviously I'm not an expert, but I just am having trouble figuring out exactly where they're, because like 3,500 square feet, give or take, even if you adjust for, the circulation will move. I got about 20 parking spaces. So I just must be missing something because that's obviously quite a big difference.
Yeah, so I think this is the conceptual plan of the first and second, the first floor, ground floor level, which shows where the transit hub would go. This would actually be 2 levels. So it would eliminate all the parking along here as well as along here.
Mm-hmm.
some of this middle area here. And then, you know, their estimates of parking loss is kind of obviously, like the whole plan is conceptual now. So
Right.
those numbers could be high or low. When you look here, you would lose parking due to this pathway over top of here, which on the top level will connect to the walkway to Main Street, be an accessible pathway over to where there's an elevator here. There'll also be an elevator here as well, but this just creates an accessible pathway for people to get down to Market Street.
And it's true that they did provide 2 options for this, right? And one did not have that pathway.
Right. We knew.
So that's an additional like 20 parking spaces.
Yeah, we knew that parking might be a concern, so we wanted to look at what an option if you just didn't have this here. The other option, if you didn't have this pedestrian pathway, you'd have to say if you come across the walkway, you'd take the elevator down and then along the exterior of the garage on the lower level, ground level, you'd walk around. So you could save some parking spaces that way.
And so when they talk about us losing those spaces, that's just within the garage proper, right? Do they add back in the amount of spaces that we're going to gain on Main Street and then also on the Chestnut Street extension by extending the one-way all the way down to Market?
No, I think they were just looking at the garage initially.
Okay.
We did make mention of the fact that obviously with the buses no longer up here, that's what could be a parking lane. And I think I would recommend that would be a parking lane, would provide, more valuable parking spaces out on the street right in front of these businesses here. Those ones you mentioned here. And with our streetscape project, which again is yet to be designed, but for Market Street, that's another project as part of the DRI, we would hope to pick up some parking spaces. While we would lose some probably in front of Foothills with the redesign and the geometry of this intersection here to make it safer, as safe as it needs to be for the amount of pedestrian traffic we expect to be crossing the street. We might be able to gain a few here and there, certainly down on this end. Market Street's very wide, too wide really, and I think we can create parking there for the future development they may benefit from it.
Great. So it sounds like the parking potential loss is an estimate that doesn't take into account a few factors that could significantly cut that number down. But also it sounds like depending on the designs received through an RFP process for option 1, that number could be different too. Especially if we were to specify that we wanted to minimize the impact on parking based on the footprint. Correct?
I think their proposal for option 1 does minimize the impact on parking. It's the minimal square footage that we need for both OPT and trailways to be located there. There's really room to, anywhere else you move it, you're still going to eliminate at least as many parking spaces if you can't really move it outside the garage due to to fit the bus bays. So I would expect it wouldn't get any better.
Okay. But it might not be quite as bad as it appears.
Could be.
I would add that we don't allow for any possible use of bike sharing hub, auto charging stations, taxi stands or Zipcar terminals. Any of those would be inside the parking garage would of course use up spaces as well.
Is that true? Because I thought that there was the taxi stand location in option 1 as well.
Could be. Is there a taxi stand there? I don't know.
Taxi stand. Yep.
Okay.
And so, we would still sort of to the main point of this, we would still own the property at 27 Market for future development if we were able to, get something worked out with Zipcar, for example, or bike share. So that could work as well.
I would, we would still own
without
for development. I would just say that.
Yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I would just say that 27 Market shouldn't be looked at as an option for a permanent parking expansion of any sort, whether it's storing of vehicles for like a zip car type of operation or for just public parking. It wouldn't be consistent with our code update that Steve and the Planning Commission are working on, and it really wouldn't be consistent with what we want to see downtown. Of course, we want to see development, but I think the only thing I would say about that, we'd probably want, if there were a zip car type of situation, to have that incorporated into existing parking space.
Gotcha. So I guess then my question becomes, there is parking in the plan for option 2 for 27 Market Street.
Yeah, and that was just a matter of, we were getting down to the wire, and that didn't get updated. But in our discussions, we talked about eliminating that. This would be more case. There isn't, and I'll let Dave Hoteling jump in if he'd like to on this one. But we did talk about, it's not really necessary to have a handful of spots here. They could be full street parking and in the garage.
We had decided that it wasn't necessary. I mean, the garage was close enough that it would only be a matter of employee parking there. So we could still leave that open on the side.
And Dave's, your employees for the most part, almost all park at the bus garage.
Oh, that's right. You had mentioned that, right?
I only have 2 employees that park uptown, myself and 1 dispatcher, and we both park in the parking garage.
So just one additional concern, and it's, Greg, something that you had sort of alluded to with regard to safety. I think that if our goal is to create a single hub for ridership, etc., I just am curious about, we're adding bus traffic to that intersection, significant amount of bus traffic. We're changing the traffic patterns. If I'm a rider, I've purchased, and this is assuming that we were to go forward with option 2. I purchased my ticket at the transit hub at 27 Market Street, and I have to cross Chestnut Street amid traffic and buses pulling out. And I'm just curious about safety considerations there that have been looked at, because it just, to me, doesn't seem like the safest thing right off the bat.
Yeah, I think safety has been accommodated in this design. Certainly Wendell, with their expertise, that was a big concern of theirs throughout the design process. It's one of the main points that they're looking at when they're doing their test fits to see where, these bus movements can fit. And that's kind of the purpose, if I zoom in here a little bit, of these bump outs, as they're called, the curb. So this would make the intersection or the crosswalk here at Chestnut Extension much narrower. I don't have a measuring tool at the moment. It's probably like 20 feet or less. I mean, it's a one-way street. It narrows up at the crosswalk. It makes it very visible for distances for pedestrians and cars to see one another. Also, you only have traffic in one direction crossing here. So the pedestrian traffic going to and from the transit hub over to the bus bays would only have one short crossing to make, and it would be at a controlled intersection. Of course, this would be a stop sign or controlled intersection, so it's not like a mid-block crosswalk. So certainly in the detailed design phase, there's more work to be done here to really make sure that it's done right. But considerable thought was put into this by the consultant we hired.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you for elaborating on that a little bit for me. I'll yield. I have stuff, but I'll yield to everybody.
Gary?
Sorry about that, Dave.
My main concern between the 2 options, really, it is the parking issue. I think it would be a significant loss if we go with option 1. As far as, there's also the safety aspect of it. I understand we can put a few spaces back up on Main Street where the buses currently are, but we got to remember that is an area right now that is a safety hazard with the buses that are pulling out. And while we could put some cars there, it's an intersection on a curve at a light and then we're going to have cars still pulling out. So I think we may be limited how many parking spaces we actually want to use there. Parking on Market Street, I mean, I'm sure we can add some parking, but that area right now, the way it's designed, is a fairly tight road. People go through, we still have to make sure we slow down traffic through there. And the number one thing is people use the parking garage to go up to Main Street, go to businesses on Main Street. They're not going to want to park down on Market Street and then walk all the way up to Main Street. I really think it wouldn't be utilized enough. And as far as the safety on Lower Chestnut there, I mean, I agree that's been an issue. But one thing that we could always do is if we could talk about potentially blocking off that section of the roadway south of where the new exit is going to be from the parking garage, and that way traffic gets directed right back up to Main Street. I mean, that could potentially be an option, I would assume. So I still think. Oh, and lastly, I don't know, with the changes that are going to happen with the parking garage, going with option 1 without the walkway on the top level, I don't think would be a good idea, especially when there's going to be more pedestrian traffic. People are going to be looking to go to both corners of the parking garage, one for the elevator, one to go down to the bus terminal there. I think we're going to be more prone to problems if we aren't directing at least some of the pedestrian walking through there. So just for that reason, I would still go with option 2. I also want to thank Greg and Ginny for the work they did to answer the questions and get all that out to everybody before tonight's meeting.
Gary, I'm not sure if you can see me or not.
No, I can't see you because the screen's here. Go ahead, Lon.
So Gary, we own 27 Market Street now.
Correct.
Okay. And then we have a grant. I apologize, I don't remember where it's from, but to raise the building, we have a grant to raise the building, correct?
Correct. It's a Restore New York grant.
And so we can activate that here in 21, right?
Correct.
And then after we do that, we're going to do an environmental study to find out, to make sure that the soils underneath this structure that's been there for however long, 100 years, whatever it is, to make sure that everything is safe, that we can build that future development can be put on that. Isn't that kind of the pathway, the progression as we're moving forward?
Greg can answer that better than I can. My understanding, and I could be wrong, is that it's actually reverse, is that before demolition, we will have a full analysis. The preliminary analysis was done of the contamination there, and it was found to be surprisingly minor. But I believe that there will be a full environmental assessment as part of the demolition process before demolition. Greg, am I correct in that?
Yeah.
So to be safe about this, wouldn't we want to, before we think of developing 27 Market Street, wouldn't we want to do we have the grant money, move forward on that. So we're going to do the seeker and the environmental study along with the demo. Get that done before we decide to move forward with, Greg, I apologize. Is it 6,000 square feet? We're looking at 5.3 in 2020 or 2019 estimates. Is that correct?
Well, Len, let me say this, that we currently have almost a $500,000 grant to demolish that building.
Right.
That grant is now about 4 years old. The state I have been begging them to hold it open for us over the last couple of years as we've had to deal with the difficulty in acquiring the building from the 12 tribes. They have been working with us on that, which I appreciate. They will not hold it open for much longer. the bottom line is that if we have, that building has to come down, period.
Right.
I mean, one way or another, that building has to come down. If we don't take it down now, then it's going to come down at a later time, maybe decades from now, without a grant. So the building is going to come down and the site's going to be made ready for development, because otherwise we have a blight in the middle of our downtown for as far as the eye can see into the future.
Thank you for that explanation, Gary. And I wholeheartedly agree with that process that we need to move forward on 27 Market Street. That's why in the beginning of last year, I think this council agreed to move forward because it is a blight. I know speaking for myself, I definitely want to move forward in getting that done and making sure that future development is safe. I'm just wondering at this point, and again, like others, Greg and Jenny, I truly appreciate the probably thousands of hours that you guys, along with Dave Hoteling, have put into this, or at least hundreds of hours that you put into this project. But for me right now, I reached out and I talked to Jody Zareski and said, you know, if this property was yours, what would you do? And I did get permission before I tell everybody what he said, that he approved what I'm about to say, that he would do that. Just what you described, Gary, is go ahead and we've purchased the building. We would use the monies to raise the building and do the seeker and do the environmental study. And then we would have a parcel ready for development. And he agreed that going out to an RFP to see what other developers would like to do with that lot. Because I agree with Greg in his report back to us that we don't want to create more parking. We have sufficient parking as it stands. We want to create the environment for folks to want to live and shop downtown. So I'm just wondering if maybe the safe bet moving forward is to go with option one with the RFP, and at the same time simultaneously move forward with, as you described, Gary, raising the existing 27 Market Street, doing the seeker and doing the environmental study. And then if it looks like we need to develop that, then we could move forward with it. But I talked to a couple other developers, or folks that are in economic development in the Albany area, and they both said the same thing, is that partially developing the city-owned lot will decrease your chances in attracting developers. So I just wanted to allow council to know what I was doing.
Yeah, let me just add a couple things to that, Len. One, when you say go forward with the RFP on option one, that means spending over $1 million on creating a design that will, when presented to the Planning Commission when complete, stands a very high chance of not getting through the seeker process because of the lack of the parking spaces. Do we want to spend over $1 million to create a construction document to present to the Planning Commission, which they have already stated as a body they are likely not to approve? The other part of it is that we're talking about development there. The idea of having the entire parcel available for development sounds good, but if you're going to build a mixed-use building there with 50, 60 apartments, and you're taking away more parking spaces, how are you going to get approval to build a mixed-use building there that's going to bring in another 60 or more cars? And where are they going to park? So, you know, it's hard to see another way out of this. Katie Laparishu?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope, and Mark Davies had mentioned this at the last meeting, that folks would be encouraged to take the bus as the point of us going forward with this. I just wanted to just mention because I think we're talking a lot about, sorry, I hadn't fully unmuted myself. I think we're talking a lot about the parking still. Just that basically we're talking about a cost difference of $5 or so million. And we talk about how expensive parking is. We're saying that these 50 parking spaces, if we can agree on that number, are worth $5 million. I think that that is not the way that I want to go forward. I think when I hear this,
I'm
we're
going to
going
talk about 80 parking spaces, Gary, not 50. I don't see enough. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't see enough information to reduce it by 30 or more.
Oh, that's fine. I did have a professional do the math. And again, that's why I wanted to hear just where specifically that number was coming from, because parking spaces are approximately 180 square feet. So with regardless, even if it's 80, my point remains the same, which is that, you know, we say we're going to lose these parking spaces as if they can never be brought back strategically. We're talking about doing, as a city, a comprehensive parking study where we reevaluate the city's parking, its parking structure, where parking is located. I think that if we were to move forward, knowing that we're making a conscious decision to save $5 million, plus other things and other reservations that I have, I think that we could move forward purposefully and strategically and figure out how many parking spaces we need and add them back to the community. They wouldn't be in a centralized location like the parking garage, but potentially they could be on the east end of Main Street, closer to Sal's and Mama Nina's, where I always have trouble parking. I think that there's a way for us to continue to support our downtown business community strategically, like I said. I don't think that this is, you know, a silver bullet in this plan. Again, I have other reservations that I can absolutely get into. But I think that, you know, when I hear that we're losing this parking, we can never come back from that. I just think that that's very short-sighted.
Let me just, I want to bring David O'Tailing into the conversation because this is not just about parking, it's also about operations in terms of his view as to what the two options will provide in terms of operations, which, you know, in addition to being able to make it multimodal and the space required from an operational perspective. David, can you chime in here?
Well, I think with option 2, it's going to give us more space to do our trainings. It's going to give us more space to expand down in the future. Like I think Greg and all have said, I mean, we'll have room for possible lease spacing. With option 1, we just don't have that room. We're very limited. I mean, I believe we had room, Greg, if I'm not mistaken, for public restrooms, but with the option 2, we had more room. You know, it's going to make it very much easier for operational for me. I can tell you that.
Scott?
Just a couple things here is, Greg, you kept saying about doing a parking study. Have we gone any further with the parking study? Because I think if we were going further with the parking study, I think that would answer a lot of these questions and what's on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, there have been a few parking studies done in the last couple of decades, and it's been, I think, 6 or 7 years since the last one. I don't think we need another parking study to duplicate those. Not much has changed since then. The one that was used as a basis when Loss on Deeds was reviewed is still applicable. what we'd like to do, and what I've been talking about doing, is looking at the citywide parking regulations. Not so much in the parking studies that were done, we're focused on downtown number of parking spaces, occupancy, that sort of thing. And we'll look at that again and review that as well, in the context of current plans. But we also want to look at the regulations with respect to snow removal, with respect to street cleaning, that kind of thing. And then on top of that, the last parking study didn't look into paid parking at all. And I think that was because the council at that time, just before the parking study was done, around the same time, had gotten rid of paid parking that was in place at the time.
So since you've
But
had,
to fund things long-term, such as a parking garage, there really needs to be a revenue source for that. And it only makes sense that would be paid parking. So that's something we want to explore. That's probably one of the biggest pieces of it.
right, you're getting into my next series of questions, but back to the parking. Since we haven't seen any of the previous parking studies that were done, is the trend for vehicles, are they going up or are they starting to trend down in the parking studies? Like say like in 1980, we needed say 2,000 spaces, and now in 1990, it was 1,100, and then 2000, it was whatever. Is it, does it give a trend or not really?
Not really. So they're typically a snapshot in time, and the whole thinking around parking is changing as well. When you look at downtown Indiana before urban renewal, take a look at an aerial photo, and then look at it now. There's a lot of blank space that's filled with parking, whether it's private or public. It took how many years before the Clarion was built, and I wouldn't argue that that's the most applicable development for downtown. And a lot of Market Street is still vacant or very low density suburban style buildings. So we have more parking than we'll probably ever need. I only see, while the study didn't say this, I can only see the demand for parking. Yes, when you add more people downtown, which is what we're trying to do, it goes up a little bit. But at the same time, when you create a downtown with a high quality transit system, a transit center, walkable, it's going to provide people with an option other than a car. And that's going to reduce the need for people who live downtown to have a car. Obviously, cars aren't going anywhere for forever, probably. So you still need to accommodate them. But there are other considerations. I think I mentioned one of my answers was talking about, you do need to kind of consider autonomous cars. At some point, people aren't, you look at Uber, those sort of Zipcar, where there's like shared vehicles, you don't necessarily need to own a car if you're living or using downtown. So long-term, I see no need to add any additional parking. It's just like, I think some people have said, how we use that and how do we manage it? But short-term, not much is changing in the short term. And, if we do take away a ton of parking spaces, it'll have an impact. Are there things that we can do to accommodate that? Things we can change? Sure. But I think for me, the positives of building option 2 on 27 Market Street outweigh the positives for building on option 1. Just like we could redevelop 27 Market Street in the future. If we left it vacant, we can redevelop the parking garage in a different way in the future if there becomes less of a need for parking spaces.
Luke Murphy?
I wasn't done yet, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry,
Sorry,
Scott.
God, I didn't mean to hide you.
No, that's all right. So when you were talking about parking revenues and I was going through, we haven't really, I don't know where the numbers are coming up about how much money we're really going to be being able to put in our coffers to maintain that parking garage in the future, because we're not currently charging for any parking. So where do we come up with the numbers for how much money we would be getting towards that?
Well, first we looked at, and Jenny, if you want to jump in with our historical parking revenue when we did have meters, we looked at that, and then I looked at other cities in upstate New York, Binghamton, Albany, Syracuse, some smaller places, and see what they're charging as far as rates. And then I looked a little bit at what our current occupancy is and what the ideal occupancy. You want to structure paid parking or your parking plan so that you have 85% occupancy pretty much anywhere you go. That's the ideal. You don't want to have completely packed. There's no spaces. You don't want to have barren, parking lots that are a waste of space. So looking at that and looking at the number of spaces we have and where the parking is, on-street parking, you can get potentially more for than parking garage or parking lot type of parking. And then you have two types. You have metered hourly parking, and you might have parking permits where someone like the Lost on Deeds or downtown property owners, residential property owners, or the residents themselves could purchase a permit. So they have a reserved space. Maybe it's not one reserved space, but they have a permit to use a certain area like the parking garage for 24-hour year-round parking. So I kind of figured, and I can't tell the numbers off the top of my head. Again, this is a rough estimate. You know, this is something that we'll look a lot more in depth into as part of our parking analysis over the next year. But, you know, I kind of figured a certain number of parking permit spaces based on, you know, there is a Lost on Deeds. There's some other projects that are being talked about, and our whole goal, which is to have more people living downtown. You would assume that they would want to take advantage of those. And then the rest of them looking at metered parking. So it's a guesstimate. It's a high level estimate.
All right. The only other thing, and this is just kind of for the council where I have a hold up. We have a lot of buildings in the city of Oneonta that we already currently own, like the public safety building. And we know that that's going to eventually either have to be a major renovation done to it or moved, or because we're starting to outgrow as we go. City Hall, when you walk around City Hall and you look, there's a lot of work that the City Hall needs itself. And we have the Armory, which, you know, that can use substantial help. So I'm hesitant to take on another building. And I know we said about, you know, fares of the buses and other sorts of revenues, but if there's one lesson I take out of this pandemic is all those funding revenues can tank real fast. And that's just my opinion. That's where my holdup is you know, we're still coming out of this pandemic, and you know, I understand we got to do the parking garage. I like to think that we're going to do it fiscally as responsible as we can, and that's just where my holdup is.
Okay. Luke Murphy, I think you had your hand up first.
Yeah, a couple of things. Just actually a question and a comment. The way I look at this is how we're investing in our future. And I after looking at both the plans, I'm not going to pretend for a moment to have anywhere near the level of expertise of Greg or their associates working with us. But it just seems like it's a lot more in line with what we're trying to do, bring people downtown. So that, for those interested, that's where my stand is on it. And the second is, and I hope I'm not putting him on the spot, a question for Mark Drenick. This being in the 8th Ward, and I know perhaps the merchants of the 8th Ward don't necessarily know the language of Plan 1 versus Plan 2, but is there any feeling about how they feel about going forward with this? And if you don't know, I apologize for putting you on the spot.
Yeah, what's up with that? No, I can't tell you anything except anecdotally, and that's really not worth much. But what as long as, are you done, Luke? Because actually I want to see if I can just piggyback on what you had said and then add my own thoughts. Luke, I feel like you're exactly right. This is about Oneonta's future. We right now are making judgments and assessments based on what we know right now. And what we know right now is not what we're going to know in 20 years. And we're going to box ourselves into something that we may very well be very upset with the fact that was done. And the option 2, frankly, is not where I was, but it's where I'm at now. And it comes down to a bunch of different things. One is Dave Hoteling and his crew. It's been my pleasure to work with those guys. I intimately know OPT these last umpteen years with my own business. And I know the cramped quarters that they're dealing with right now. would be such a positive thing for them to be able to use a space that provides access for training, to be able to provide the kind of customer service that they would want to, that would allow Oneonta to represent itself to the general public and the Oneonta public as a state-of-the-art transportation facility within the context of the transit hub. Beyond that, the parking spaces, Greg, you know more about this than I ever could, but I just disagree with you about the need for parking and that we have plenty of parking. I really don't think that we have the amount of parking that people think we have. Anecdotally, I'll go anecdotally now for you, Luke. Anecdotally, I can tell you that people are always upset at the prospect of not being able to find a parking spot in the place that they want it when they want to get to a particular part of downtown. If we have a vibrant Kano, if we have an active YMCA, it's very difficult to think that with the lofts on Dietz, that there's going to be a lot of extra parking spaces in the Dietz Street lot. When you're looking at the parking garage as it stands right now, and I'm sorry, I don't really believe that the agreement that was made is actually ever going to show itself to be something that's grounded in reality, where, what is it, 80 parking spaces have been reserved for the folks in the lofts on Dietz in the parking garage. Well, first of all, that's wiping out those parking spots because they're reserved for the lofts on Dietz. I don't believe for a minute that people are not going to just park right next to the lofts on Dietz and in essence use two spaces because they're doing that. So parking is for me the ultimate, deciding factor here. I feel like, and let me add one more piece. The development of 27 Market Street, to me, that just makes a ton of sense. It's right across from the foothills. I think it's going to be an incredibly valuable piece of property that will wind up developed, and the city will see tax monies because of that. But one of the things that this, the current iteration, the current sketch of the transit hub shows is this continuation of the aesthetic of downtown's architecture, down Chestnut Street extension and kind of fronting Market Street and creating kind of, an extension really of the aesthetic of Main Street. And I think that's incredibly valuable. And then when you add that to the fact that now you've got a parcel of land that is sort of developed, with the green space, et cetera, but is easily turned into something that we could, that will wind up potentially being something built upon by somebody who's not only the attractiveness of being across the street from the foothills, but also being right next door to a well-designed, functioning, and state-of-the-art facility. That's likely to wind up being something that we're glad that we allowed. So for all of that, and lastly, I guess one last thing is that, yeah, fiscally, we can make a case for not doing anything all the time. It's always a smart idea not to spend money, except when it's not. And I think we have to look at the future here. And I think we have to look at parking, and we have to look at the overall aesthetic of downtown. And so I'm for number 2.
Okay, if I could, I just want to point out what our decisions are right now to be made before we go off too far from where we need to get to. From what we're looking at right now is a decision to just put out an RFP, a request for proposals for construction documents. I am told that the cost of this project will be over $1 million. So if we put out an RFP, if we select a contractor to do the work for us, it'll cost us about $1 million to develop these construction projects. Is that right, Greg?
Yeah, that's the estimate we were.
Okay. So there's really, I mean, unless somebody can come up with something that I can't think of, I see 4 options where we're at now. We've taken this up to a point where we need to make a decision. Option 1 is to tell the staff to go out and issue the RFP to build option 1, which is to have the transit hub inside the parking garage. You know, the risk on that is spending $1 million on something that may not ever be approved because of the loss of parking spaces. Second choice is to tell the staff to go ahead with issue an RFP for construction documents on option 2, which is having another building on 27 Market Street in addition to the renovation of the parking garage. A third choice is to issue an RFP only to renovate the parking garage and do nothing about a transit hub. We have money to go towards the parking garage. We won't have that money forever. We're already on borrowed time. We desperately need to renovate that parking garage. It's getting worse every year. People won't park their car in it because of the rust stains they get on it if it rains. So the other option is say, the hell with the transit hub, after all of this, just do the RFP to do the parking garage. Or the last option is to do nothing. I can't think of anything else other than those 4 choices right now. If somebody is smarter and come up with a 5th choice, that would be great, but I can't. Katie?
Not what I'm going to say. I just wanted to clarify one thing that Mark Drenick said with regard to the continuity of Main Street. When we passed the new code, any development that goes into 27 Market Street, whether the city builds it or not, will meet those standards. I just think that's important.
Katie is paying attention. Good for you. So those are the 4 choices that we have. Now, the recommendation that we have, the unanimous recommendation from the staff who worked on this, is to issue an RFP on option 2. So I think that's what's on the table. If a majority of the council says no, opposes doing that, so be it. Then it's what is the option that you want to pursue? What is a majority of the council you want to pursue? Do you want to do nothing? Do you want to just renovate the parking garage, forget about the transit hub? Or do you want to issue an RFP for option 1 and spend the money on that? Len?
Thank you, Gary. I just want to get some clarification, and if the city staff could help me out, I'd appreciate that. So referring to the space program that's within this recommendation of option 2, I'm just a little confused, so help me out here. So we're currently utilizing 2,000 square feet between the 2 locations of OPT and Trailways. Option 1 offers you 4,000 square feet, and that, I'm being told tonight by city staff, correct me if I'm wrong, is not sufficient enough. You're doubling the size, but it's not sufficient for maybe future training purposes. But then yet in option 2, you go back and show me a revenue share cost of 2,000 square feet at $2,000 or $1 per square foot, thus garnishing us, was it $24,000 a year? So I'm just a little confused where you said you needed more space than option 1, and yet you're selling it out in option 2. So if I could get some clarification on that. And the last question I have is, under the $1 million for the RFP, what is the city share?
Well, with regard to the space, my understanding, as shown in the component breakdown, is that the conference room, that sort of thing, this training space is not included in the first option. Again, as we discussed earlier with respect to a question Katie asked, the final layout of the rooms within the buildings, that hasn't been done. The component estimate is based on, that's high level. That's square footages. That's not laying things out. So things can change. Certainly option 1 is sufficient to run the operations. we didn't say it wasn't sufficient. There's just more space available, more flexibility with option 2. And with option 2, if you recall, the walkway in the second floor that runs parallel to Chestnut Extension, which would provide an accessible pathway for people coming down that street from the corner, a more accessible pathway. The original design of that didn't include any sort of use of the space beneath that in the first floor, which would be ground level at the corner of Market and Chestnut. Go back up Chestnut, it kind of buries itself in the ground there. You know, it would face the plaza at ground level, the proposed plaza. That it would be wasted space if we didn't utilize it. So that was a perfect place to take advantage of that and utilize that in some other way. You know, space that the city wouldn't need for the transit hub purpose or trailways purpose, but could be utilized for some commercial space, which would complement and build upon the transit hub being there. That's why there's that additional 2,000 square feet in the second house.
Right, but Greg, that's 2,000 square feet that we initially have to pay for. We got to maintain it. We got to heat it. We got to cool it. So we do have to look at these costs. I absolutely want our city staff to have training and move forward and have training space. But I'm a little confused on how we move from 2,000 square feet to 4,000 square feet. That's more than double what you have. And yet we're going to sell off 2,000 square feet for revenue because you need the revenue to make the numbers. I mean, that's how we move from one being dramatically different than option 1. I mean, option 2, all of a sudden the revenue share was much greater. And you base that on the 24,000 that you're collecting on that 2,000 square foot space.
That's right.
You're getting rid of the 2,000 square feet space that you guys say that you need for city staff events.
Mark, I think, Len, did you get an answer to your second question, which was how much is the local share
No, thank you.
on this? I don't, or maybe Jenny knows. I don't know the answer to that. Jenny?
But currently we have the grant that we have in place right now, our local share is 10%. However, with the estimates that we have for the $1 million cost of the engineering and design portion, that particular grant does not cover it. So we would have to go into our DRI grants to fund the remaining balance. But what we need to be careful of is when we decide on option 1 versus option 2, as the mayor pointed out in the beginning of the conversation, we do not want to waste our grant funds. We want to be fiscally responsible as far as choosing the proper option, so we're not wasting funds on something that's going to either get denied or not built at all. And if I can just add to Scott's questions before on the parking revenues, I want you to know that we have a high demand in our office from employees that work in the downtown area and also from the people who rent in the downtown area for parking permits. They want either monthly, they want annual, they want seasonal. That the demand is high. So it would be a very successful program for future revenues. I also want to stress that we have talked in detail with DOT as far as applying for extra funds for the transit hub construction. That application is going to be coming out in about a month or so, and I've been told that we have very good chances of getting additional funds towards the project. So, and I also want to endorse everything that has been said here tonight, that the vision of the future for the city is something that I think should be carefully considered in this decision to expand the vision of what is going to be available to the citizenry in 5 to 10 years from now in the development of that property. And as far as Len's idea, as far as developing the lot itself, there's still going to be available space behind and by the side of the new transit hub for a developer to come in and to build something that would be useful. However, we don't have that option right now. The option that we have is the one that's being presented to you. So I just wanted to emphasize on those things, that as far as in a financial viewpoint, as I said in my narrative, is we have to look at what we've got now. Greg and I and Dave Hotelian and Judy have come up with a plan of how to fund the debt payments, if that's the way we have to go, or to receive additional grant funds to cover the OPT side of it, and to institute the paid parking to raise the funds for the general fund side for the parking garage. And as Greg has mentioned before, the parking garage is going to be there. And the mayor also said it's in great need for renovation. And those costs are going to be here from now until we take the parking garage down. So those funds, those expenses are not going to change unless we improve and repair the parking garage on a consistent basis. So I'm just trying to give you the financial vision of looking at the chain reaction and the long-term effect of doing the investment of this project. So from my financial viewpoint, I strongly support option 2 for not only for the vision, but for the future possibilities that this option will bring to the community and to the residents.
I think Mark Davies had his hand up first.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 2 questions. So Jenny, on that point, I appreciate the point about a vision and a view towards the future. And that's certainly, that's central to my mind, is what the future is going to bring. But for me, that lot, 27 Market Street, was always part of that future and was a really kind of a valuable site. So what I'd like to understand is, I guess, a couple questions. I don't know if this is Greg or who this would be for, but A, can we subdivide that lot if we need to sell to a developer? B, how much is left of that particular site then that we could be able to sell? Because I want to make sure that that would still, if we were going to do option 2, still have a viable lot there to be able to develop.
As far as subdivision, I can't answer specifically or definitively as to the process there. That's something that would have to be explored. I don't see why not.
That goes through the planning commission, I believe, a subdivision.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be something that I can assure.
But in terms of space, that is the plan, Mark. The plan is to, I don't know the percentage of that lot that's being taken by the transit hub. I'm going to guess it's around 30%, 25, 30% in that neighborhood. I could be off.
I think it's less than that.
Less than that. So the majority of that property is still going to be available. And my eyeball is probably 75% is still available. The idea is to continue to make that available for development. It can be 75% of that can be built and actually just expands it makes the transit hub, you can build around the transit hub so the transit hub actually becomes part of a bigger building. Wendell suggested building the transit hub in a way, and maybe it's cost prohibitive, I don't know, but building the transit hub in a way that you could cantilever another structure right over the top of it. So eventually, if you do have a mixed use building there, the transit hub becomes the first floor, the first and second floor of that corner of that building. So the concept is definitely to continue to make as much as 75% of that property available for further development.
Thank you. And my second question, I think, Greg, this was best for you. I don't recall, but I heard, sitting in my head is an estimate of 20 years life for the parking garage. I guess if we move forward on these repairs, is that kind of within that 20-year lifespan? Is that going to extend this lifespan? I'm just trying to understand is if we are to invest in option 1 and building into that particular site, what's the long-term or what's the kind of future lifespan of the parking garage after we put these repairs into it?
Yeah, I mean, from what my understanding from the structural analysis has been done, it's in pretty good structural shape, and really the way it's constructed with the steel, and it's something that can be extended indefinitely. Obviously, it takes major renovations and rehabs, like we did a few years ago, just painting it. It's like hundreds of thousands of dollars, but that's necessary maintenance items. I would say to keep it going. You can replace steel members, you can replace sections of concrete. It's not something that has a definite end date where it needs to be demolished. It's something that with investment, it can keep going. Obviously, you know, in our experience with the Trailways building now, which is similar to how the new transit hub would be proposed, it's built into the structure. It's difficult to maintain the building when you start to have issues after, you know, it was built in the 70s. We have leaking. We had to move trailways from one side of the building to the other because we just had leaks that were uncontrollable. You know, they kept recurring due to it being right beneath the ramp above. You know, certainly that's after many decades of wear and tear, and it's just difficult to access those things. So the maintenance becomes a little bit more difficult in that situation, but it's not impossible. So I would say that it can be maintained. Or I wouldn't put a number on it, but certainly more than 20 years. We're not going to 20 years down the road have to make a decision about demolishing the parking garage and rebuilding or anything like that.
Thanks, Greg.
Sure.
Dave Risberger was next.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to point out a couple things. Ginny, I appreciate the work you've done. I've known you for the 9 years I've been on council, you and Meg. One thing I've noticed over the years is you both have been very conservative with your revenue projections, and you've been conservative with your spending recommendations to the council. And I think because of that, we've been very successful, at least in the 9 years I've been on council. So I thank you for that. And I think for me, it means an awful lot to hear from you, your recommendation here, and that you are confident that we can pay for option 2. I understand the concerns everybody has about subdividing or allowing development to happen at 27 Market Street. I certainly believe that we should strive to subdivide that lot, because if we do that, I think it'll also work very well with the development we want to do on Market Street. And we want to make Market Street more usable and more walkable. And having an empty lot there really doesn't add to that. Putting the transit hub there would, but there's an awful lot of space that's left there. I wouldn't agree with putting a parking lot there. I don't think that really adds to the Market Street look that we're looking for. And as far as the 4 options, I think the 4th option of doing nothing is a non-starter. I think we should eliminate that. I don't think that's even really an option for us here. And for me, I wouldn't go with just renovating the parking garage. I don't think that takes care of all the issues we have. And we have a lot of issues, big issues in Oneonta. And when we originally got the $10 million through the DRI, it was to go big, make transformative changes. And simply to renovate the parking garage alone is really not going to be transformative for what we're looking for. We need to get the buses off Main Street, centralize them. I think for me, the only option here really, or the best option based on what our staff has recommended to us, is option 2. So.
Katie Lapari.
Thank you. So a couple things have come up in my brain. One is I would like to follow up on something that Greg just said with regard to maintenance of option 1 versus maintenance of option 2. You know, my initial thought when you started talking about all that was that, yeah, we're talking about building another building that we'll have to maintain. Not only that, we're going to become landlords, and I'm not sure what processes are in place for that, for the city to rent out space and, you know, be property managers. But then, Greg, you had mentioned that it might be easier to maintain the 2 buildings separately rather than integrating the building into the parking garage. And I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that. Did I hear you correctly? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, regarding that point, I was just saying, when you have a building constructed underneath another building with like a foot of space between them, and when you have a leak coming through the ramp in the parking garage coming on top of the roof of the Trailways building, there's really no way to access the roof to make the repair. So it can be problematic when you have those kind of things. Obviously, with a bigger building on the second lot, there's a little bit more square footage, and the maintenance costs are anticipated to be higher overall. Obviously, that can be offset by renting the space. And to rent space, we do that now, like with the Trailways building. That's a city-owned building in the parking garage that we rent to them.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Sort of, yes. I guess my question is, this is sort of a different design, and theoretically, could it be taken into account that the city has not been able to successfully maintain the trailway space, and in order to design an integrated transit hub, that would be something that would be critical to that design?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think I know what you're saying. The new
Without a foot of space, so you could fix the roof if you needed to.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, if it comes down to structural repairs of the parking garage and interruptions, there's just more of a conflict.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And then I just wanted to second what Dave said. That's something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I actually emailed Jenny about that. I'm amazed at how much she puts together to make all this work. Where I am still scared financially is that we are still not even coming out of a tough budget year. And a lot of these things, because it is so many different things put in place. I guess my question is, Jenny, like, what happens if all the pieces don't fall into place? How do we fund if we've overextended?
Okay, no one has a crystal ball as far as, what will be successful and what won't. But one thing that I can assure you is that city staff will do everything in their power to make everything work as much as we can as far as the anticipated plan.
Of course.
And just so you know, on the OPT, no matter what, let me separate the funds.
Okay.
General fund for the parking garage is 3.5 million. That is not going to change between option 1 and option 2. So what we're talking about really for the additional change between option 1 and option 2 is the OPT side. That's where the additional money comes in. So if we get additional grant money from DOT 5311 for the capital expansion, that will reduce that 3.5 million possible bond issuance. Also, the city receives, I tried to explain it in my narrative, the city is awarded 5311 operating aid every year, about 135,000. The city has not utilized that aid since 2015 because we have run at such a surplus. So what we would be able to do is creatively reorganize the funding. I've already confirmed with OPT or with DOT what revenues we could stipulate to go towards the debt payment and not have to apply it to our 5311 operations. So those items are already in discussion, and we've already got a plan as far as, okay, we can take contract stops, put that towards our debt. We can take advertising, we can put that towards our debt. Advertising contracts, we were as high as 64,000 one year, 72,000 another year. Right now we're under 10,000. So David Hotelian and I have discussed increasing our advertising back up to more substantial numbers. So we've got a number of ideas and topics that we want to explore to get those revenues up. That way the finance office can shift how the money is being applied towards the debt. So can we predict a pandemic where our ridership falls? No, we can't do that. We did last year. We didn't think we would be in this position this year.
Of course.
But what we can do is know that if we've got the funds in place and the plan in place, and also hopefully the grants in place, we will have a strong foundation to make solid decisions. And DOT has invested so much in Oneonta And they know that we follow through with our grants, and that is one thing that I think we have tried to emphasize to all council members, is that one reason the city really receives so many grants is because the state sees us complete our grant work. They see that we're in compliance with our grant work, and that is really to the benefit of the city.
Okay, so I guess just follow-up question, and this is something that I thought I understood, but now that you're saying it, maybe I don't. Are you saying that we can't, that if we were to proceed with option one, that we wouldn't be following
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the end of your question.
through with a grant? Oh, if you're, I'm sorry. So I think I cut out a little bit. So are you saying that if we were to proceed with option one, we would in some way be neglecting a grant that we've been awarded? Because I was under the impression that it was all applicable to option one as well. And then option two was sort of an additional cost. And whether that's funded through the transit, like you had said, you know, is not irrelevant, but kind of beside the grant point, which is what I was trying to get at.
No, you are understanding it correctly, and I apologize if I'm not explaining it well enough. The difference between option one and option two is the cost of the transit hub. So it's not going to affect the general fund.
Right.
It's going to affect the transit fund.
Right.
And so,
I'm sorry, let me reiterate my question because I don't think I asked it well. So you were saying that when we're awarded grant funds, one of the reasons why we are so desirable for grant funding is because we follow through. So that made it sound to me like if we were to proceed with option one, we wouldn't be following through with a specific grant opportunity.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that in the future, and hopefully with the grant application that's going to be available to us in about a month, we will have a strong consideration for additional funds. I can't promise it, but DOT has said to me, you know, please apply because we think we can give you additional help. They haven't told me the amount, but they said that we have a good chance of getting additional help. But again, I can't guarantee it, but I just know what they have said to me.
I think I fully understand the funding sources now, Jenny, and that is no small thing. And that is entirely because of your patience with me. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I just want to reiterate what Dave said. I agree. I think options 3 and 4 of just the simple renovation doesn't really solve the problem, and we absolutely cannot do nothing. I do have a question though, which is pretty random. When we, and I hope that we will, move the transit hub down to Market Street, will it be still in memory of John and Seta?
I don't know that anybody has gotten that point yet. That's certainly something that can be discussed.
Okay. Thank
I mean,
you.
that would be a council decision. I mean, naming the transit hub would be a council decision. Glenn?
Thank you, Gary. I apologize, Jenny. Through your narrative of the city share, I didn't quite get, what was the actual amount that the city taxpayers have to pay for that approximate $1 million RFP?
Well, it's a complicated answer, Len, because there's different grant funds that would be applied towards it. So currently, the grant that requires a local match is $650,000 grant. Our local match to that is 10%, so that's $65,000. The balance would be coming out of one of the DRI grants, which does not require a local match. But however, as I cautioned you before, is that we don't want to waste that grant money on something that's not going to come to fruition.
No, I heard you. So actual tax dollars being used for this grant would be $65,000.
Local tax dollars, yes.
Okay.
Okay. I think I'm going to try to move this forward. You know, as I said, there are 4 potential options. You know, I've heard some people say that option 3 and option 4 are off the table, but everybody may not feel that way. I think what's on the table right now is whether to concur with the staff's recommendation to issue an RFP to explore further design and construction of option 2. I don't know any other way to deal with this than just to put a motion out and let people vote on it. So I'm going to entertain a motion to concur with the staff's recommendation to issue an RFP for the further design of the renovation of the parking garage in conjunction with a structure on 27 Market Street. Do I have anybody who would move that? Councilmember Drenick, Councilmember Murphy, seconds.
I would.
Okay, discussion, any further discussion? Okay, I'm gonna take a vote. Councilmember Murphy,
Aye.
Councilmember Davies,
I didn't start out the evening here, but yes.
Councilmember Risberger,
Yes.
Councilmember Lepari Shu,
No.
Councilmember Carson,
No.
Councilmember Harrington,
No.
Councilmember Rafter,
Yes.
Councilmember Drenick.
Yes.
Okay, that's 5 yeses, the motion passes. So what the staff is authorized to issue an RFP. The next step will be, once proposals come into that RFP, council will have the ability to approve an award or not to a firm to move forward with it. So it's one step at a time. I mean, we're taking baby steps here. We're not building something tomorrow. Okay, with that, my computer screen went to sleep. Okay. Additional business, anybody? Correspondence, Carrie, do you have any correspondence to share?
Yes, we do have
Oh,
correspondence.
Bonnie is here. By the way, has everybody met Bonnie? Bonnie Kuzo, our new deputy clerk?
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Go ahead, Bonnie, sorry.
That's okay. We have some correspondence from David Hutchison, and he's asked that his petition be read. So I will read his correspondence. As the transportation hub is going to be funded by state and possibly federal and city funds, and because all these support good environmental stewardship, he suggests the following. Number 1, the city consider and pursue certified consultants to evaluate non-fossil energy, such as solar and geothermal for heating and cooling, following the guidelines and intent of the recently enacted New York State law, Community Leadership and Community Protection Act, CLCPA. Number 2, the city make every attempt to implement recommendations in CLCPA in any future renovation or new construction by using solar panels and proven energy efficient ground source heat pumps, GSHP, also known as geothermal and air source heat pumps, ASHP. Note, currently non-lithium ion batteries developed by DOE, the Department of Energy, store electrical energy for 6 days, and these 1
milliwatts and 150 milliwatt electrical storage units are being demonstrated by Form Energy of Somerville, Massachusetts. Number 3, the city should apply for grants up to 200,000 or 250,000 announced January 27, 2021, with a comment, the early bird gets the worm, at a Zoom meeting of Mohawk Valley Economic Development District. Oneonta and Otsego County are in this district to support non-fossil energy initiatives. Amy Wynett and Bennett Sandler at Otsego County Conservation Associates can be contacted for more information. It would be wonderful if the city of Oneonta were the first in New York State to have a non-fossil fuel transportation hub. We should dip our feet into the water. I hear it is quite fine and the temperature is just right now. Thank you for your time and consideration. David Hutchinson.
Thank you, Bonnie. Dave, if you're out there, you're still awake, haven't gone to sleep yet. I don't know why the RFP that we submit could not include exploring the feasibility of using non-fossil fuels. Greg, you comfortable with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Any further items for discussion? Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead, Len.
Great. Are you skipping down to executive session also, or?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So I'm going to entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss a contract negotiation. And I'd ask to have David Merzick join us. I think Katie is making that motion. And Len is seconding. All in favor, just raise your hand. We do, okay. Bonnie, do you know how to do that?
Yes, I will begin the breakout session now.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Give me a second while I should have had this motion ready, but I didn't. But I will find it quickly. Judy, are you still out there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I know you sent me the motion. I'm trying to find it. You have it in front of you?
Let me, sorry, let me look through my sents here. This will take me a minute.
Oh, I got it. I got it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I have a motion that the Common Council accepts the proposal from the New York State Business Development Corporation to release the city's full mortgage position on the property located at 219-225 Main Street, which is the former Bombers Burritos location, in exchange for $3,000 to come from the proceeds of the New York Business Development Corporation's ultimate sale of the property. It further authorizes the acceptance of any amount up to the extent of its cash outlay of $50,000 in the event of any overage from said sale. Do I have a motion to approve? Councilmember Davies, second by Councilmember Lepari Shu. Discussion? I'll call the vote. Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davies?
Aye.
Councilmember Risberger?
Aye.
Councilmember Lepari Shu?
Aye.
Councilmember Carson? Councilmember Harrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter?
Aye.
Councilmember Drenick?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, with that, unless there is any other business, I do see a hand up. Glenn Carson?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session to discuss a labor issue. Our personnel director, I can verify that better, but at this time we need to go into executive session. Labor issue.
You want Katie Bedker to join us, I presume?
Yes.
Anybody else?
Katie, is there anybody else? No.
Okay, Bonnie, do your magic again. Okay, we are back in open session. I believe we have completed our business for tonight. And therefore, thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.
Good night.